Certainly the history notion is extremely important. I find among the biggest mistakes of general managers is a failure to appreciate or get a running start at looking at the future. And that discipline and that you learned in your history is very important to looking at effective running starts at predicting trends and our future environments and looking at displacements and disruptions. And clearly, Dan mentioned and we want to keep looking forward at issues like OTT and disruptive nature and also the apportionment of allocation of interest in those looking forward to leveraging OTT and those that have fought it for so long that have to embrace it at some point in their future moving forward. So let's keep that in mind, those figures as well. And also looking at the density and nexus of devices in proximity areas like the household, or what I call captive area networks, looking at your car, looking in an elevator, looking in a store, that the marriage of the ideas of the proliferation of sensors change the dynamics of usage patterns and open up new commerce initiatives, especially where authentication and attestation come about, new commerce is possible. And so we don't want to look at these just from the operating infrastructure standpoint, but from what they make possible in our lives and in commerce going forward. We're going to hear next from Peter Jarich with current analysis. And what is remarkable in his scope is the issue of dealing with the full spectrum of wireline activities and wireless activities and the evolving infrastructure that is shaping itself on a daily basis and transforming how we leverage the technologies in our operating infrastructure to support wireless and wireless in its transition as well. So help me welcome Peter Jarich. Jarich.
So I was, as I listened to Ben talk about the value of engineering degrees and military backgrounds, I was wondering how he was going to spin my random set of educational, so we just avoided it. I appreciate just skip that, because we don't know how foreign service matters or anything like that. And having gotten that degree, I'm not sure either. So if you have kids that are trying to go into foreign service, steer them away. So figure out the right direction. So being the last speaker, sort of doing this role, I've always been told there's a couple things you want to be aware of. Everything that you could say has probably already been said, so thanks guys. I tried to give them money to hold back, but so you got to do two things. One, you got to make sure you at least have more slides than everyone, because if you can't say anything new, at least you can have more slides. The second part is everyone's probably a little bit tired, or you want to get back to the bar, or you want to get home. So you've got to keep the slides really simple, so avoid things like Kager, or terms like Nexus, or things that... So the really easy way to do that is you basically develop 4 slides, and you take each bullet point and make its own slide. So I've got that, and hopefully we can walk you through some of this, and we can get back to the drinks or questions. So first thing, I want to talk about stuff that we all know. And this is stuff that you should all know, either because everyone else already said it, or because you're just following tech, right? So we all know, particularly in the US, mobile penetration gone past the 100% mark. News to anyone? Okay, good. So far, so good. Second is, we know that we're talking about a smartphone world. If you look out there, you don't have to be a genius to know that we've gone from the feature phone world to the smartphone world. Our numbers, we're tracking the number of placements out there at every single carrier deck in the US. If you look at it just in terms of what's being offered out there, feature phones really aren't being sold anymore, right? Smartphones are what the operators are pushing. Smartphones are what are driving the revenues for the operators. Again, probably not surprised. Does anyone here have a feature phone? Right? You actually carrying? I see this is good. Yeah. You should talk to someone about that. We can help you. we've heard a lot about the over-the-tops, right? The over-the-top. Does anyone not know what an over-the-top is? So over-the-top, services that are being delivered over an operator's network, right? The Hulus, Flickrs, Dropbox, the Facebook to some extent. We all understand that these guys have come on force, and depending on who you're talking to, they're a big worry, right? In the US, operators really don't seem too worried about them. In Europe, they're scared to death, right? They see them taking their voice revenues, they see them taking their data revenues, they see them taking their messaging revenues. How do we deal with them? We know it's a question. The other thing, we heard earlier the idea about who's capturing some of the revenue. This is just another way of looking at this. Again, going back to what we see the placements in terms of operators' decks. You look at the devices that our operators are offering, across the top 4 operators in the US, somewhere around half the devices to around 40% are being offered from Samsung or Apple. It's not just that Samsung and Apple are capturing all the profits, they're capturing all the value, but they're capturing what's being offered by the operators. And this all really impacts the profits, right? That's part of what's in there. They drive the value, they've got the components, they're what's on the shelves. So, we also know tablets are big, right? I actually live above an Apple store. It's not a joke. I wish it was. So every morning you go out, you see a line. The line, when the iPad mini was there, it was like 4 times as long. I don't think that people knew why, but they knew, hey, it's a tablet, it's cool, it's Apple. What we also know, though, is that connected tablets really aren't. Connected tablets, as much as operators have been trying to push this, really haven't caught on. You look at the number of SKUs that are being offered by operators, the number of SKUs that operators are trying to sell, 8%. 8% of the tablets that are being sold out there by operators are under a contract. Most, they realize, you know what? People want the Wi-Fi stuff. If they don't want the Wi-Fi stuff, if they want connected, they don't want to pay a contract for it. We really haven't gotten that part figured out. So these things, though, they lead to some power shifts. So we want to talk a bit about power shift. And really, this all leads to more power going from the incumbents, as we may want to talk about it. Really think about the operators, think about the incumbent vendors, to the consumers. So this first point here, right? We talked about penetration, we get the saturation point. Well, what happens when you go over 100%? When you go over 100%, you get to this battle for the switcher, right? The operators can no longer look at new customers. They got to figure out how do they poach customers from someone else. It means we're talking about more competition between them, better for the end user. Same part of that is that when you see that level of competition, that competition breeds new types of services. We heard a bit about this idea about people moving towards tiered data. Well, that's great. We've seen AT&T do that. We've seen Verizon do that. You've seen the response. T-Mobile going to unlimited data. Sprint playing up unlimited data. In other markets, you see people selling things based on speed. You see data buckets. You see shared data plans. This competition means, for the end user, there's a lot more diversity out there in terms of how they actually buy their services, particularly if we're talking data. So the other part that I think you see from this competition side of things is the subsidy side. So a lot is made in the market, and everyone talks about, well, we're trying to get away from subsidies, and the subsidies are hitting the operators. Well, that's just bull. Because if you're looking for a little bit of disagreement here, if you look at where subsidies have gone over the last couple of years, they've only gone up. That's about a $90 difference over the last 2 years in terms of how much extra subsidy is placed on a device. The subsidies aren't going down, they are going up. That's part of competition, right? When you want to get users, you don't say, oh, I really want to poach you from some other guy, but I'm going to subsidize my devices less. No, you have to offer more. At the same time, smartphones cost more. We move from feature phones to smartphones. Again, great thing for the end consumer, not so much if you're an operator. We talked about over-the-tops. The over-the-tops are really driving this competition. They're scaring some operators. Well, beyond that being good for the consumers, you're also seeing this result in some pricing innovation. Look at Europe. Hasn't come to the US right now. Has anyone heard the term zero rating? Does anyone know what zero rating is? Zero rating is the concept of, I'm not going to charge Peter for 2 gigs of data, and then he uses Facebook and that comes out of the package. I'm going to charge him for 1 gig of data, and then charge him $10 if he wants unlimited Facebook. Or charge him $20 and he wants unlimited Hulu. This is an example from Europe, an operator called Soch. Soch is a secondary label of orange. It stands for social. It's really aimed after the young kids. It's named after the youth. They've got a zero-rated package here. Pays a little bit extra, unlimited Twitter, unlimited Facebook. The vendors have been ready to do this for years. You talk to any network vendor on the policy side, they're ready to roll out these use cases all you want. Operators, they're moving a little bit slower on this. But we're seeing this because of competition. We're seeing this because of the over-the-tops. So we talked about tablets. I think we heard some about this. No one really knows how to sell connected tablets yet. But the nice thing is, no one's given up. So the good part about that is we are seeing the innovation. We heard a bit about the Amazon model, right? The $50 for a year's worth of data on LTE. Granted, it's 250 meg a month, so you're not talking about a lot of data. But it gets people biting, right? Hey, I'm going to pay $50 a month. I'll bite, and then I'll pay AT&T some extra when I run out. Great idea, right? Shared data. How do we get people to use their tablets? How do we get them to buy connected tablets? Shared data. Again, nice new innovation there in terms of the tablet side of things. Not much has been brought so far about in terms of what we see from a competition standpoint in terms of the platforms. So we've got two main ecosystems out there. We talked about iOS. We talked about Android. No operators are happy about that, right? As much as a lot of people may have been happy to see RIM kind of go away, no one's really, from an operator standpoint, happy to see a two-ecosystem world out there. They want to drive as much else that's out there, right? So we see them pushing Windows. We see them pushing Tizen. We see them pushing, anyone know what the top one is? Right, Firefox OS, all right? We see the operators trying to get behind that. Ultimately, is it going to work? Who knows? Ultimately, is it good for the end user? Is it good for the device makers who can try and maybe get behind something else, break into it? Yeah. Do we know if it's going to work? Jury's still out. One of the other things that we see in terms of this power shift from a device standpoint is really LTE. LTE has given an opportunity for some new players to get in. Yes, people talk about LTE in terms of being efficient. It's great on the network. They talk about if you're an operator, can you differentiate? This is from Everything Everywhere in the UK. Wow, we've got great data rates. Yeah, it's great for the operator there, right? But one of the interesting things is this idea of LTE for everyone. It's not just the Huawei's, it's not just the ZTEs that are coming in with sub-$150 devices. It's also the LGs. It's also some of the other labels. When you've got a position where one or two people really maintain that top position on the device side, yeah, the small guys are going to fight to death to see how they get in there. If that means offering $150 phones in a new category, now granted, this is no contract, right? You buy that $150 device, you can walk away from Metro PCS and you've got a nice piece of hardware there for $150. It's pretty remarkable if you think about it just a couple of years ago. We also see this in terms of devices and what we call policy. So we heard a bit about Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi for offload. Yeah, Wi-Fi for offload is a no-brainer. We're going to see lots of Wi-Fi offload there. The question is, how is that offload being managed? Is it just right now when the operator says, I'm going to push you off onto this Wi-Fi network? No. If you look at where the standards are and you look at what's going on, that's not where it is. This is being pushed down to the device where the end user is going to get to decide how that takes place. So the question is, what comes now, right? We know the operators are kind of a different position, the device guys have a sort of different position. What comes next, and how do we pull back some of this value so that it's not just out to the end users? So first thing is homegrown over-the-top services. T-Mobile, Telefonica, you see what's going on with RCS? Operators are trying to figure out how do they get that piece of the pie themselves. How do they compete with the over-the-tops? By being their own over-the-top services. If it makes sense, we need to see a lot more of it. Second is, how do we monetize over-the-top services? We can talk about, oh no, over-the-tops are really eating our lunch, but is there a way where we can monetize them? We talk a lot about video, and that there's not a role for compression of video. Well, yeah, there's not a role of compression for video if we're trying to save traffic. If we're trying to figure out how we decompress some of that video and charge people more, that's the role for video. If we're trying to figure out how we peel back some value in the value chain, that's where the value comes in. We've seen vendors doing this just this week. Do I get a minute back when I've got hardware problems here? Everyone else went under, so that means I get more time. We saw just this week one of the main policy vendors who bought two video guys for just this same role. They positioned it for monetization. Can we make it happen? We got to try. The other thing we need to think about is ignoring the consumer. And I'm not calling the consumers dinosaurs. Does anyone know what this is? Nice. So did any of you see today the announcement from Cisco involving AT&T and Qualcomm? So Cisco announced a context-aware Wi-Fi solution. Again, Wi-Fi for offload is cool, it's great to talk about it. It doesn't really benefit operators that much. We got to think about what else can we do with Wi-Fi that's not just offload. Offload's boring, offload's dumb. It's a simple thing to do. But can we monetize Wi-Fi? Because then we can get people to buy it. Cisco announced it today. Using location, using analytics, how do we take what we know from the Wi-Fi network, sell it back to people, right? Great example, they're rolling this out right now. There's a party over at the Fern Bank where what they've done there is you walk through with your device, uses Wi-Fi location to say, hey, you know what, there's 5 people in the cafeteria right now. If you come down here, we can give you 10% off the sandwich, right? Because they know where you are, they know who's in the cafeteria. When you walk by an exhibit that no one's been seen and you're about to walk by, they go, hey, check out this exhibit. How do we think about using these technologies in a new way to actually ignore the end user customer, but think about maybe the enterprises, think about somewhere where there is money and there's an ROI to actually be sold. 2 last points here. One, so I live out in the Bay Area, California, and if you're out in the Bay Area, there's a big focus on the maker, right? It's the maker economy. It's people that they're doing stuff on their own, they're building products, they're kind of making their own, they want to skin their device, they want to jailbreak their iPhone, put on their own apps. That's where the future is. Those people are wrong. Because yeah, there are people out there, but that's not your average person. And we see this all the time, right? We see people who are saying, let's do this with NFC. We're going to drive NFC by giving people tags, and they can program their own tags. Well, that's stupid. The average consumer does not want to program their own tags. They want someone to give them tags that do stuff. They don't want to have to figure that out, right? That's the whole idea behind, the whole Windows thing. You can customize it. It does what you want. The whole thing you see with Firefox, you see you can really customize this. The average user doesn't want to customize their device. They want a device that works. So this idea when you're going out there and trying to talk about customization, talk about the maker, that does not work for your average consumer. That may work for you, you're not the average consumer. So don't use yourself as a reference point. Same thing goes on with what I was talking about, Wi-Fi and policy. It's a really cool idea to say, give someone policy tools on their device. To say, I want to offload to this network when I'm at the top of my data plan, but I want to stay on my network if I'm not. The average consumer's not going to figure that out. These ideas are great in theory, but they're stupid in execution, because the average consumer's not going to do this stuff. So the last point really here, though, that I want to end with is, if you're trying to figure out how to really generate some value here, it's support the agendas that are out there, particularly from operators. When we talk with operators who, let's face it, are still the biggest channel for devices, the biggest channel for tablets, particularly connected tablets, the biggest channel for a lot of these services, the one thing we hear over and over again is there's all sorts of stuff we'd like to do, but no one's supporting us. Right? We're really trying to drive some new bands. We want to use some new spectrum bands, but the device guys won't get behind it. We're really trying to figure out about NFC, but no one's supporting it. We want to get into connected health, but some of the connected health standards like ANT aren't really in the devices. Well, it's a huge opportunity out there. And if you're trying to figure out, well, how do I grow my share and how do I grow my relevance, and you're not supporting those things, well, you really don't have anyone to blame but yourself, because you guys know this stuff, and so it shouldn't be too surprising. So that said, thank you very much, and I guess go to questions.
Thank you very much, especially introducing the pricing issues that help clarify some of our thinking, the policies. And we're certainly in transition there. I certainly believe we're not at the end of our creativity of pricing practices.